With missile tests, giant guns, and attack drones filling the sky, today we're checking out the scariest displays of military power, and each one is more terrifying than the last. From the world's biggest nuke to the most threatening border display of all time. Just imagine you're minding your own business, guarding your country's border when you see a series of giant explosions in the distance. You'd probably get ready for an all-out invasion, but it could just be a threatening display of power from two military besties. In March 2015, the U.S. military joined up with South Korea's army to conduct a joint exercise at Camp Casey, just 13 miles from North Korea's border. The demonstration took place in the suitably named Rocket Valley, and it involved a simulation of a joint air attack involving America's most powerful aircraft. Launch rocket systems were fired repeatedly against fake defenses over 7 miles away. Then once they'd been blown up, A-10 Thunderbolt attack planes flew in to hit the positions at closer range. As if that wasn't enough, Apache helicopters were then deployed to destroy any remaining targets in rapid successive fire with missile rockets and 30mm chain guns.
Stop! He's already dead!
It all sounds and looks badass, but for the North Koreans, the display was scary as hell. Just 2 months earlier in January, Kim Jong-un said he would suspend all of their nuclear weapon tests if the U.S. stopped performing military drills with South Korea. The U.S. didn't oblige, and while they say the demonstration was held to test their air and ground units, it was also clearly a big ol' screw you to Kim. We've heard you loud and clear. We had loads of emails from those who missed out on our insane 50% off plushie deal, so we've extended it for 1 extra week only. He's soft, cuddly, and irresistible. He's my perfect real-life copy. Everyone loves him, with loads of 5-star reviews backing up the quality. Whether he's sitting on your desk or chilling on your bed, he's the perfect companion. And remember, every plushie is designed by us, and every purchase helps support the channel and keeps the videos coming. This very last deal lasts until the 13th of June only. It will never be this cheap again, so don't miss out. Scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description and grab your Bartholomew while this insane deal lasts. But North Korea don't really have a leg to stand on, as their military demonstrations are designed to intimidate the entire world. The enormous spectacles have been held since the country formed in 1948, and they often look like a preview of an upcoming world war. Missiles usually make an important appearance, and in the 2020s, the Hwasong-17 and Hwasong-18 have been the bells of the ball. These are intercontinental ballistic missiles that are capable of delivering nuclear warheads across the entire planet. The 80-foot-tall missiles are first launched through Earth's atmosphere before traveling through space 2,000 miles above the surface and re-entering the atmosphere to strike the intended target. This saves energy and lets the missiles strike directly from above, making them much harder to intercept. It also massively extends the missile's range, and the display of the Hwasong ICBMs is a thinly veiled threat, as they're able to strike anywhere in the continental United States.
Y'all going to excuse me just a second. I've got to go pee and then throw up.
In February 2023, over a dozen Hwasong-17 and 18 models took center stage during a procession, leading many to speculate that North Korea might have more ballistic missiles than America's arsenal of 400. Later that year, NK held a Victory Day parade to mark 70 years since the end of the Korean War, and the country showed off the size of their military with tens of thousands of soldiers marching and chanting slogans like "Protect Kim Jong-un with our lives." This serves as a reminder that their military currently boasts 1.3 million active members, along with an estimated 600,000 in reserve. In comparison, South Korea possesses just 500,000 active personnel, so in a head-to-head, the North may take the edge. So whilst these parades are supposedly symbols of patriotism, they also send clear messages to other countries: don't mess with us. We'll look at some even larger military parades later on. But first, let's move from ICBMs to an even bigger boy, the Tsar Bomba. This hydrogen bomb is the largest nuclear device ever detonated, and the 30-ton Soviet weapon is responsible for the most powerful man-made explosion in history. It had an explosive yield of over 50 megatons, which is equivalent to 50 million tons of TNT. For context, that's 10 times more powerful than all the conventional weapons exploded during World War II combined, and approximately 1,570 times more powerful than the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of World War II.
I'm so afraid of her.
I'm like so afraid of her.
No, get it.
It was tested on October 30th, 1961 over Mytyushchyka Bay in the Arctic Circle. When it detonated, the mushroom cloud was 59 miles wide and 40 miles high, which is 7 times taller than Mount Everest. This was large enough to pierce a layer of Earth's atmosphere called the stratosphere, and the detonation flash was seen 620 miles away. The immediate aftermath was just as significant, as buildings 36 miles away from the explosion were completely vaporized, and the shockwaves extended for 70,000 miles, circling the Earth 3 times and shattering windows in Norway and Finland.
Now that's a lot of damage!
But what made it so powerful? Well, standard atomic bombs operate on nuclear fission reactions where atomic atoms are split to release huge amounts of energy. But in contrast, all hydrogen bombs utilize nuclear fission and nuclear fusion, where 2 atomic atoms are combined to create an outburst of energy. This double trouble of fission and fusion creates far larger explosions, and the Tsar Bomba had a 3rd stage. The energy from the 2nd stage was used to trigger a 3rd, even larger fusion stage, creating an explosion of truly epic proportions. If the Tsar Bomba was detonated in the center of New York today, Manhattan would be instantly vaporized, most of the buildings in all 5 boroughs would be leveled, and people within a 60-mile radius would receive 3rd-degree burns. There would be an estimated 7.6 million casualties, so understandably other nations were terrified when they heard about the test, especially when they discovered that the Soviets had initially designed the Tsar Bomba to be double the size with a 100 megaton yield.
Ayla, are you crazy? Are you out of your mind?
It was one of the main reasons for the 1963 Partial Test Ban Treaty, where 126 countries, including the Soviets, agreed not to test weapons in outer space, the atmosphere, and underwater. So the Tsar Bomba was undeniably one of the biggest military displays of all time, as it prompted governments all over the world to hurriedly write up treaties to ensure it could never be tested again. We'll look at some more big bombs soon, but size isn't everything, fellas. And while the Tsar Bomba is the king of wiping things out on the ground, other smaller explosives are able to take out targets in space.
I have a very bad feeling about this.
From 1947 to 1991, the US and the Soviet Union clashed against each other in the Cold War, a period where they fought for global power through proxy wars, the space race, and economic competition. They never directly attacked each other, but in the 1970s, the US government heard rumors that the Soviets were developing attack satellites that could destroy American recon satellites and even fire missiles at the ground below. So they decided to respond by showing off their own military prowess and developing the ASM-135A, the first missile that was able to successfully strike satellites in orbit. It took a while to perfect, but in September '85 it was carried to an elevation of 38,000 feet on a fighter jet before being launched at America's abandoned Solon satellite. The 1-ton spacecraft was traveling 345 miles above the Earth's surface at around 15,000 miles per hour, but the missile blew Solon out of the sky, showing the Soviets that their spacecraft weren't safe from America's military. Ultimately, no one wanted the Cold War to escalate to a physical conflict, so after America made their point, the anti-satellite missile project was retired in 1988. But for a second there, the satellite killer had everyone scared, and like mullets and Y2K clothing, the trend has recently come back into fashion. In 2024, Russia quietly launched a satellite called Cosmos 2576 into low Earth orbit, and the Pentagon believes that it's likely a space weapon designed to destroy other satellites. Some even believe that the Cosmos can be fitted with a nuclear warhead to blow enemy spacecraft out of the sky. While Russia haven't commented on these rumors, in 2022 they did say that if the US aided Ukraine during the Russian-Ukrainian war, their satellites could become targets. So the launch was a threat that demonstrated Russia's power as well as a bit of payback for the development of the ASM all the way back in the 80s. But this is just the beginning, and other countries have developed anti-satellite weapons of their own. This ASAT concept features a circular saw extension to crash into enemy satellites, and China has been developing giant lasers that can break the electronics on a satellite from Earth's surface. So everybody's getting in on the orbital flexing, and it looks like there's a real possibility that someday soon, Star Wars will become a reality. In a moment, we'll return to the Cold War and check out a terrifying weapon from its most infamous conflict, Vietnam. But for now, let's stay in the future and explore America's autonomous locust drones that are designed to attack the enemy in a giant swarm. Yep, the US has been developing these weapons as an alternative to traditional missiles, as a large number of drones could be cheaper to operate and more effective at destroying a target. They've conducted multiple demonstrations to show off their new toy, launching up to 30 drones in synchronized formations. The footage is pretty impressive, but during an actual war, they'd aim to unleash thousands of drones at once, and each one could carry a payload of radar sensors, signal jammers, or explosive warheads to serve different purposes. The drones could strike enemy defenses and vehicles from multiple angles with high precision, and their small size makes it incredibly difficult for enemy radars to detect them. The US is still working to increase their current maximum flight time of 2 hours, and the American tech company Palantir is looking at combining these weapons with facial recognition software. In theory, these drones could fly over the battlefield and use AI to identify friendly troops, aid vehicles, and enemy combatants.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
They've released commercials to show off the concept, and the US military gave them a $178 million contract to develop a similar system for a ground vehicle called Titan. So this development shows that one day the drone swarms could reach the enemy completely undetected before striking individual soldiers using AI. And whilst dozens of the drones may be shot down during an attack, thousands of backups could still fly through and overwhelm the strongest of defenses. We'll head back to the future later on by checking out a country that's used a terrifying sound weapon on its own citizens. But first, let's go back in time. Nothing can compete with man's long-lasting fear of fire, and that's why one of the cruelest displays of military power in history was the use of napalm during the Vietnam War. It was created in 1942 by a team from Harvard University led by chemist Louis Feiser. They made it by reacting aluminum salts with two thickening agents, naphthenic and palmitic acid. This formed a kind of soap, and when it was combined with gasoline, it became a highly flammable gel that stuck to targets and burnt for a long time at temperatures between 1500 and 2200 degrees. This made it the perfect ammunition for firebombs and flamethrowers, and after being successfully used in the latter stages of World War II and the Korean War, a flood of the deadly goo was shipped out to Vietnam in the 1960s. The US didn't actually deploy troops in Vietnam until 1965, but the first known napalm attack of the war came in 1962, when South Vietnamese pilots trained by the US dropped napalm firebombs on some North Vietnamese soldiers. Then when America directly joined the war, this deadly substance became the bread and butter of their bombing strategy. A bombing run could cover an area of over 22,000 square feet in fire, destroying huge sections of Vietnam's jungle. This obviously caused severe burns, but the weapons also created so much fire that it sucked up all the oxygen in the air around the target. This made it incredibly useful at clearing out hidden bunkers and trenches in the jungle, as the soldiers hiding from the fire had to climb to the surface to escape suffocation. Now all this sounds absolutely terrifying, and That's exactly what the US government was aiming for. See, napalm was also widely considered to be a psychological weapon, and it was used by foot soldiers to burn villages to install fear into the North Vietnamese population. While the weapon was effective at attacking the enemy, it was just as useful as a show of power to highlight how technologically advanced the US military was compared to North Vietnam. But of course, ultimately this brutality was all for nothing, as North Vietnam beat back the US forces and America withdrew from the country in 1973. Overall, around 388,000 tons of American napalm fell on Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos from 1963 to 1973, causing a huge amount of destruction. But as footage of these inhumane strikes was released to the public, it was widely condemned, and in 1980 the indiscriminate use of napalm against civilian targets was banned by the United Nations. It's now a symbol of the Vietnam War's brutality and features heavily in movies about the conflict.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
But the nightmare isn't over. Russia have been accused of using drones to drop napalm during the Russian-Ukraine war, and the US has developed a successor to napalm with the Mark 77 bomb. This weapon is functionally very similar, and it was used in the 2000s and 2010s during the Iraq War, showing that America is still using fire to physically and psychologically overpower its enemies. Of course, flamethrowers have come a long way since Nam, and they've only become more sophisticated and deadly. A prime example of this is the TOS-1A flamethrower system, a Russian rocket launcher designed to fire incendiary rockets that create giant fireballs. The system is mounted on a tank, and it has an automatic aiming system that targets the enemy with a range of 3.7 miles. Each tank stores 24 missiles at a time, and it can fire them all off in just 6 seconds before reloading. The Russian military has an estimated 48 TOS-1s in their inventory, and the weapon has been used in several wars since it was first tested during the Soviet-Afghan conflict in 1988. But the TOS isn't just an incendiary weapon, it can also fire thermobaric rockets. Thermo what now? Well, these rockets specifically trigger a small explosion that releases a cloud of explosive material before igniting the cloud to create a giant fireball that sucks in all the oxygen in the surrounding area. Temperatures can reach 5,450 degrees, vaporizing anyone within the blast radius. Furthermore, even if you aren't caught in the blast, the reaction creates a huge wave of pressure that's strong enough to rupture arteries, perforate bowels, and collapse your lungs. The Russians have boasted that the TOS-1A is the most powerful weapon in any Western arsenal, and the thermobaric rockets themselves are referred to as blazing suns. Yeah, I can't imagine anything scarier than facing 24 suns raining down at you on the battlefield. Since nuclear weapons were invented, a country's military power is often determined by how many missiles they have in their arsenal, so lots of nations aren't shy about showing them off, and the biggest military flex in modern warfare is a giant missile test. In 2018, Putin authorized a test of his Bastion coastal defense system on Kotelny Island. It fired a P-800 Onyx anti-cruise ship missile at a simulated target, and it was the first Russian demonstration of its kind north of the Arctic Circle. The Onyx missile have been dubbed as ship killers, and they have a range of 186 miles and can carry nuclear warheads. So the test was widely seen as a display of power to show the world what would happen if they put ships in the Russian Arctic. It'll come as no surprise that missile testing also occurs quite regularly in North Korea. The Hermit Nation conducted around 40 tests in 2024 and 60 tests in 2022, showcasing their KN-23 and Hwasong missiles. In comparison, the US only tests their ICBMs 3 or 4 times a year, and Russia has conducted less than 10 successful ICBM tests annually over the last few years. Since we don't know exactly how many warheads North Korea has, their ICBMs ICBM tests are even more ominous and scary, as their frequency gives signs that the country's nuclear arsenal is giant.
I'm scared of you.
Despite the small amount of trials, America isn't immune to a ballistic brag. In 2023, they showcased a launch of their SM-2 Standard missile from a destroyer ship in the Coral Sea. The SM-2 is the U.S. Navy's primary defense weapon on ships able to intercept anti-ship missiles like the Russian Onyx at altitudes of 65,000 feet. It's a reliable weapon that's made over 2,800 successful test flights, and these demonstrations have prompted 10 other countries to acquire over 12,000 SM-2s to get their own slice of the action. Of course, showing a missile being launched is one thing, but if you really want to scare your enemy, you need to show what happens when the weapon makes impact. That's why in 2013, Norway tested one of their subsonic missiles by blowing up one of their own ships. They wanted to show off their 880-pound naval strike missile that's designed to attack enemy ships or land targets from Norway's own destroyers. So they took the decommissioned K&M Trondheim warship and blew it up off the coast of Andoya Island. The impact was filmed at multiple angles, and the military released the footage with a clear message. Imagine if this was one of your ships that had foolishly sailed into Norwegian waters. Okay, I'm having a panic attack, and before we all start having nightmares about missile attacks, let's cheer ourselves up with another parade. An elephant walk is a demonstration that involves taxiing several aircraft on a runway simultaneously to show off the might of a country's Air Force. On May 6, 2025, the U.S. Air Force held one of the largest examples in modern history at their Kadena Air Base in Okinawa, Japan. The procession involved 53 vehicles, including fighter jets, helicopters, missile systems, drones, and spy planes. The aircraft were taxied along the ground in perfect formation before takeoff, and they all displayed some impressive weapons and technology. One spy plane, the RC-135, is able to fly for 12 hours straight and eavesdrop on cell phone calls and radio transmissions to monitor the enemy. This walked alongside that giant P-8 spy craft that can also listen in on enemy comms and use them to locate submarines that they then target with torpedoes. These big boys were accompanied by 25 F-35A fighter jets, 6 HH-60 helicopters, and 2 MIM-104 missile launchers, as well as several other members of the U.S. Air Force family. Whilst it may look like a fairly innocent military display, it's actually a thinly veiled threat directed at China and North Korea, showing off America's defensive power in the Indo-Pacific region and their close allyship with Japan. I mean, instead of showing off some of your most powerful vehicles, why not show all of them at the largest U.S. military base in East Asia? That's one way to send a message, but it's far from the biggest military parade of all time. Every year, Russia's military holds a Victory Day parade to mark the Allies' triumph over Germany in World War II. They're always impressive demonstrations, but you can't beat the original, and the first parade in 1945 is believed to be the biggest military demonstration in history. Over 40,000 soldiers and 1,850 armored vehicles marched through Moscow. Then at the end of the parade, a number of captured German standards were thrown to the ground to officially mark Soviet victory. It was incredibly impressive, but why would you need to demonstrate your military prowess after winning a war? Well, some people now see the parade as an early warning sign of the Cold War, as the Soviets clearly wanted to demonstrate their strength to their Western allies, including America. The modern parades are still considered an intimidation tactic, and in 2025, the event consisted of over 11,000 soldiers and an additional 1,500 servicemen who just returned from fighting in the Russian-Ukraine War. They were joined by 200 tanks dating from World War II to modern day, flyovers from fighter jets, and some of Russia's intercontinental ballistic missiles. This time they weren't disguising the show of force, as a Russian academic directly compared World War II to Russia's current standoff with the West on state television. Multiple Victory Day ceremonies were held across the rest of Russia, and in a historic throwback, St. Petersburg and Volgograd reverted back to their old Soviet names of Leningrad and Stalingrad for the day. This blast from the past wasn't just nostalgia, and it was clearly designed to highlight the Soviet Union's previous victories and, of course, their bitter rivalry with the West during the Cold War. As we've seen, countries often show off their military power to intimidate their enemies, but sometimes a government uses terrifying weapons to install fear into their own population. On March 15, 2025, 325,000 protesters marched through Belgrade, Serbia after a train station roof collapsed and took the lives of 10 people. The public blamed the government for the tragedy, but the demonstrations caught the attention of the entire world when the Serbian government was accused of illegally using a sonic weapon on the protesters. According to witnesses, a massive wave of sound descended on them that sounded like a giant vehicle or an approaching army. As it traveled for 1,600 feet along Kralja Milana Street, the crowd parted like the Red Sea and many protesters fell over and fainted from the deafening volume. A sound cannon sounds pretty futuristic, but the weapon described sounds a lot like a long-range acoustic device or LRAD. These weapons are directional speakers that emit sound waves in one focused direction. Normal loudspeakers disperse sound over a wide radius, but the LRAD concentrates it in a narrow 30-degree path, which allows it to project deafening sounds over several kilometers. They can typically project sounds that reach 145 decibels in volume, which is far beyond the human pain threshold of 120 decibels and loud enough to cause immediate hearing loss. LRADs were first developed in the early 2000s by the US military, and an LRAD manufacturer called Genesis claims that they're now used in over 100 countries. Yet after the incident in Serbia, the government denied having any acoustic weapons at all. This seemed fishy, and the next day a picture that was taken on the day of the protest was posted online, and it revealed an LRAD 450 XL mounted on a truck outside the Serbian National Assembly building. So the government had been caught in their lie, and they subsequently admitted that Belgrade's police had bought LRADs from the US in 2021. However, they continued to deny that they used it on the crowd at the protest. Do you hear that? It sounds like someone's telling lies. In contrast, I hope the rumors about this next weapon aren't true, because if they are, the world will have to be on very close guard indeed. Russia is estimated to have around 6,000 nuclear missiles in their arsenal, but the meanest of the bunch is the RS-28 Sarmat, which is widely considered the world's deadliest nuclear weapon. Nicknamed the Satan II, this 116-foot ICBM is capable of carrying nuclear warheads at hypersonic speeds of up to 12,000 miles per hour. That's 15 times the speed of sound and fast enough for the missile to reach some European targets in as little as 3 minutes. In addition, the nuclear warheads stored inside Satan II are multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles, which probably sounds like gobbledygook to you, but it means that the missile releases 16 individual warheads outside of Earth's atmosphere that can propel themselves back to the surface to strike different targets at once. No one truly knows just how powerful it is yet, and most reports estimate its combined yield is around 12 to 15 megatons. But some rumors have said that its warheads can yield a combined 50 megatons, the same power as the Tsar Bomba. Yep, the combined impact of Satan II's entire payload holding up to 16 warheads at a time could potentially be big enough to destroy an area the size of Texas.
I'm in danger!
This is 35 times stronger than the payload on America's current land-based ICBM, the 1.4 megaton Minuteman III. And if that wasn't scary enough, the Satan's max range of 11,000 miles would allow the warheads to hit Washington, D.C. The first prototype was developed in 2015, but while it has been launched once successfully, every other test has been a total failure.
Well, I suppose I should thank God for that.
In 2024, a trial went completely rogue as the missile detonated inside its silo and destroyed the test site, leaving behind a massive crater. Despite this, Russia is still keen on developing Satan II, and they know how intimidating the weapon is, as they publicly boasted that it's unmatched by any other missile globally. It's hard to deny given the missile's devastating warheads, and the weapon certainly lives up to its name. Its power is practically demonic. And speaking of evil, let's travel back to Germany in World War II and move from the world's deadliest missile to the largest gun ever made. The Schwerver Gustav gun was the undisputed heavyweight champion of the weapon world, measuring in at 35 feet tall, 155 feet long, and a staggering 1,400 tons. That's 12 times heavier than a blue whale. It required a crew of over 2,000 men to operate. But with all this manpower, the gun was capable of firing 7-ton shells at targets up to 29 miles away. And each one could penetrate through 23 feet of concrete and 3 feet of steel. The weapon was initially built to destroy the Maginot Line, an 800-mile stretch of fortifications that France started building in 1929 to protect themselves from a German invasion. In preparation for the war, the Germans decided to construct a large enough weapon to obliterate the barrier in 1934. But big guns take a long time to construct, and by the time the Gustav was ready for battle in 1941, Germany had already captured France by invading the country north of the Maginot Line the year before. Still, the Gustav was ready for action, and in 1942 it was used against the Soviet Union during the siege of Sevastopol. The gun was moved on specially laid railway tracks, and each shot took several hours to set up. The weapon could only fire 14 shells per day, but over the course of the siege, 47 giant rounds were fired at the city as the Germans kept firing until the gun's barrel was worn out and needed to be replaced. Only 10 of them hit within 197 feet of their target, but they left enormous damage in the area, and the German artillery, including the Gustav, obliterated the Soviet defenses and allowed the infantry to flood in and take the city. In 1943, the Germans actually built a larger variant of the weapon called the Langer Gustav, with a 157-foot barrel and a range of up to 124 miles. They planned on setting it up in occupied Calais and using the weapon to fire shells at London from across the English Channel, attacking them from a completely different country. This could be devastating and lead way for an invasion of Britain. But fortunately, the gun was blown up in an RAF bombing raid whilst it was still under construction. All other plans to use the Gustav in battle were unsuccessful, and during a test firing in March 1943, the Germans realized that the gun just took way too much time and effort to operate. So Gustav was retired, and the only remaining model was disassembled and stored near the city of Chemnitz. Then it was destroyed completely by the Germans a day before the US military captured the area in 1945 to stop them retrieving the weapon. I guess they figured that if they couldn't have their giant gun, nobody could. Russia was the only country to actually face the might of the Gustav, but they've since developed their own supersized war machines. The Zuber-class LCAC is a behemoth of a vehicle that's designed to transport cargo and soldiers on land and sea while laying down defensive fire with some giant weapons. It's the largest hovercraft in active service, and these vehicles are able to float above the ground on a cushion of air. Large, powerful fans force air beneath the craft into a rubber seal or skirt, which forms a high-pressure bubble of air that lifts the vessel a few inches off the surface. Giant propellers push the vehicle forward, and this system allows a hovercraft to seamlessly guide across water, ice, marshland, and solid ground, making it an extremely useful carrier on diverse terrains. It could even move over low walls. The Zuber was built back in the early 90s in St. Petersburg, and it takes some giant fans to get the 187-foot-long, 415-ton beast off the ground. But it can carry a payload of 210 tons at a maximum speed of 70 miles per hour, which equates to 3 main battle tanks or up to 500 ground troops. This allows a gigantic force to storm a beach, and if you're worried these men might be sitting ducks, then fear not. The Zuber is equipped with anti-aircraft missile systems, rocket launchers, 2 giant rotating machine guns, so the Zuber can reach you anywhere and instantly deploy hundreds of soldiers and some heavy-duty firepower. There's no hiding from the behemoth, and if you get on the wrong side of this hovercraft, it might just blow you out of the water. Which display of power did you find the scariest? Let me know in the comments below, and if you want to see the weird side of warfare, check out my video on the strangest military traditions. Thanks for watching.